What if one of the most iconic royal love stories of the modern era was built on a secret so explosive that, if revealed, it could shake the monarchy to its very core? Imagine it. Meghan Markle, the American actress who married into the House of Windsor, lying on her sickbed and finally confessing the truth, that she never carried her children, that Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana were both born through surrogates, and that the world had been presented with a carefully crafted illusion. A bombshell revelation like this doesn't just challenge the image of a duchess. It calls into question the credibility of an entire institution that thrives on appearances, tradition, and legitimacy. For years, the world has marveled at the glossy photos, the radiant smiles, and the iconic baby bump cradling that Meghan performed so consistently in front of the cameras. And yet, beneath the glamour, whispers have always existed. Whispers of prosthetic bumps. Whispers of surrogates. Whispers that Meghan, in her quest to control the narrative, orchestrated one of the most audacious deceptions in royal history. But why? And more importantly, why now? Why would Meghan, so fiercely protective of her image, finally break her silence when her health was failing? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Let's rewind for a moment. Do you remember the global frenzy in 2018? Harry and Meghan had just tied the knot, and almost immediately, there were rumors of a baby on the way. The palace announced the pregnancy during the couple's tour of Australia, a tour filled with public appearances where Meghan made sure her hand rarely left her stomach. The narrative was perfect, the glamorous duchess, glowing in motherhood, representing the monarchy abroad while expecting the future of the royal bloodline. The media lapped it up. But did you ever wonder why the announcement came so quickly? Why the timing was almost too perfect? Why the bump seemed to appear overnight, as if the story was being staged more than lived? Now, consider this. The royal family has always been obsessed with presentation. For decades, Diana, Kate, even the Queen herself, showed the public their newborns outside hospital doors, often within hours of delivery. It was tradition, a rite of transparency, proof to the world that the heirs were legitimate, real, and connected to their mothers. But Meghan broke that chain. Archie's birth was shrouded in secrecy, clouded in confusion. First, there were announcements that she had gone into labor. Hours later, it was claimed the baby had already been born. And strangest of all, no immediate photographs, no smiling parents on hospital steps. Just carefully curated images released later, with details conspicuously missing. Doesn't that strike you as odd? Doesn't it raise the question, what exactly were they hiding? But before we dive too deep into the timelines, let's pause here. Because this isn't just about whether Meghan carried her children. This is about why she would go to such lengths to construct an illusion. Was it pressure from the palace? Was it her own obsession with image? Or was it a desperate attempt to maintain the fairy tale narrative she had promised to the world and, perhaps, even to herself? These are the questions that make this story more than just gossip. They make it a matter of history, legacy, and truth. Think about how power works in the royal family. Every action, every photograph, every detail is scrutinized. The monarchy thrives on the idea of continuity, that the line of succession is clear, natural, and indisputable. But if Meghan truly never gave birth herself, then everything changes. The image of a glowing mother presenting the next royal heir becomes nothing more than performance art. And in that performance lies betrayal. Not just of the family, but of the public who believed in it. Let me ask you this. If Meghan confessed today that she never carried Archie or Lilibet, how would you feel? Shocked? Betrayed? Or oddly unsurprised, given the endless stream of rumors that have circulated for years? Because here's the thing. Rumors alone don't persist unless there are cracks in the story. And Meghan's narrative has cracks big enough to drive a royal carriage through. The strange baby bumps. The absence of medical records. The secrecy around birth certificates. The refusal to share simple details that every other royal mother before her had willingly given. Doesn't it all add up to something far more orchestrated than organic? And here's where the drama intensifies. Meghan's confession didn't come during a grand televised interview or in a palace statement. It came in whispers, in the dark, while she lay vulnerable on her sickbed. In that state, stripped of her usual armor of control, she admitted what many had suspected but dared not say aloud, that the pregnancies were staged, that the children were born through surrogates, and that the prosthetic bumps were all part of the show. Imagine the weight of that moment. Imagine the years of silence, the tight grip on a secret, finally crumbling under the weight of reality. For Meghan, who built her reputation on controlling the narrative, this was the ultimate unraveling. But the truth doesn't just sit quietly. It spreads. And the implications of Meghan's revelation ripple outward like shockwaves through a monarchy already battered by scandal. If Archie and Lilibet were born via surrogates, what does that mean for their place in the line of succession? What does it mean for the royal family's claim of transparency? And how does it impact the trust between the public and an institution that relies on trust for survival? These aren't small questions. They're seismic ones, capable of reshaping the monarchy's image for generations to come. Of course, some will argue, so what if Meghan used surrogates? Plenty of women do. And they'd be right. Surrogacy is a valid, respectable choice for many families. But the difference here is the deception, the elaborate charade, the intentional presentation of a narrative that was never real. Meghan didn't simply use surrogates. She allegedly went out of her way to convince the world she hadn't. And that changes everything. It's not about the method of becoming a mother. It's about the lie that underpinned it. As we peel back the layers of this story, I want you to pay attention to one thing: the way Meghan's narrative has constantly shifted. First, silence. Then, curated images. Then, dramatic interviews painting her as a victim. And now, a sickbed confession that flips the entire story on its head. Doesn't it feel like a puzzle, where every new piece changes the picture entirely? And doesn't it make you wonder how many pieces are still missing? Here's the chilling part. Meghan's story isn't over. Her confession might be shocking, but it's just the beginning. Because when secrets of this magnitude come out, they rarely stay contained. Others know. Others talk. And when the whispers start to turn into voices, the truth begins to spread faster than any carefully crafted illusion can contain. And once the public realizes they've been deceived on such a grand scale, the backlash could be catastrophic for Meghan, for Harry, and for the royal family itself. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Let me take you back to 2018, a year that was supposed to cement Meghan Markle's fairy tale transformation from Hollywood actress to duchess. The wedding had been watched by millions, the kiss on the chapel steps replayed endlessly, and the story seemed to be unfolding just as the palace wanted: a fresh, modern face for an ancient institution. But beneath the smiles and the waving crowds, something was already brewing. And it wasn't just gossip. It was the beginning of a narrative that would spin wildly out of control. Do you remember where you were when you first heard Meghan was pregnant? The announcement came during Harry and Meghan's tour of Australia in October 2018, barely 5 months after the wedding. The timing felt almost cinematic. The world was watching the couple take on royal duties abroad, dazzling crowds, shaking hands. And then, boom, the palace confirms a royal baby is on the way. But why then? Why there? Why not back at home, surrounded by family? The decision to drop the news on foreign soil raised eyebrows, even if most people were too distracted by the excitement to ask the right questions. From the very start, the pregnancy was framed as part of the show. Meghan appeared in fitted dresses, hands constantly resting on her stomach as though every angle of every photograph needed to scream, "Baby bump." The media went into overdrive, plastering front pages with side-by-side comparisons of Meghan and Kate, spinning stories about which duchess carried pregnancy glow more gracefully. But have you ever noticed how quickly that bump seemed to appear? Almost overnight, Meghan went from barely showing to unmistakably pregnant. Natural? Or carefully timed wardrobe choices to amplify the illusion. And here's something few people remember. At Meghan's first public outing after the announcement, her bump seemed small, almost modest. Yet within weeks, photos began circulating where the bump looked dramatically larger. Now, pregnancies do grow, of course, but not with the suspicious speed and inconsistency that Meghan seemed to. Cameras caught moments where the bump seemed to shift, flatten, even fold. Some dismissed it as shadows, as the tricks of fabric. But others weren't so sure. Let's pause and really think about this. Every royal mother before Meghan, Diana, Kate, even the Queen, had been scrutinized through pregnancy. The public felt almost entitled to proof, to a connection with the future heir. And while that scrutiny might sound invasive, It served a purpose: transparency. The monarchy relies on the public's belief in its legitimacy. That's why Diana stood on the steps of St. Mary's Hospital with William and Harry, why Kate did the same with George, Charlotte, and Louis. Each moment was staged, yes, but also undeniable proof. Meghan, on the other hand, chose secrecy. No hospital reveal, no candid appearances immediately after birth. Instead, a carefully orchestrated rollout. Doesn't that seem suspicious? Think about the atmosphere in late 2018. Meghan was the new royal star, adored by many, envied by others. But she was also already clashing with staff, with her sister-in-law, with the press. Stories of diva behavior leaked constantly. What if, behind the headlines, she was already laying the groundwork for something far more significant? The illusion of a pregnancy? The prosthetic bump theories, often dismissed as conspiracies, gained traction as more footage surfaced. Videos showing the bump collapsing when she bent down. Dresses riding up in ways that suggested padding, not natural curves. Could all of this be coincidence? Or was it evidence hiding in plain sight?
It was a really hard week of the wedding, and she was upset about
Meghan
something,
often
but
spoke about wanting
she
privacy,
owned it, and she
about wanting to
apologized,
protect her
and she brought
children
me
from the public
flowers
eye.
and
But
a
then
note
why lean so
apologizing.
heavily
What
on
was
public
hard
bump
to
cradling?
get
Why
over
exaggerate
was
every
being
gesture,
blamed for
every
something
pose?
that not only I
Almost as
didn't
if to make
do,
sure nobody
but that
could
happened
doubt
to
she was
me,
pregnant.
and
Isn't
the
that
people who
curious?
were part of our
Doesn't that
wedding going to
contradiction
our comms
make you
team and
question
saying,
whether she
I
was
know this
projecting
didn't
an
happen.
image rather than living a reality? Now, think of Kate during her pregnancies. She was often subdued, even absent from public life during difficult moments like hyperemesis gravidarum. Meghan, by contrast, leaned into visibility, wearing skin-tight outfits, cupping her stomach with both hands during every photo call. Could it be that she wasn't just proud, she was overcompensating, trying a little too hard to sell the story? And then came the whispers inside the palace. Staffers, aides, even mid-level courtiers reportedly questioned what was really happening. But the royals' close ranks when threatened. Tradition and silence are their shield. If Meghan was indeed staging a pregnancy, few would dare speak out directly. Instead, leaks to tabloids began surfacing. Anonymous sources hinted at odd behavior and unusual requests. Was this palace gossip, or was it the first crack in the narrative? Let's not forget the tension with Kate. By the time Archie was on the way, the bridesmaid dress row had already poisoned the relationship. Meghan claimed Kate made her cry. Later, Kate's side suggested it was Meghan who had caused the tears. If Meghan was capable of flipping that narrative, might she have been capable of something bigger? Of flipping the very story of motherhood itself? I want you to imagine yourself in Meghan's shoes for a moment. A woman who had built her life on acting, on performance, now thrust onto the biggest stage in the world. The pressure to deliver, not just a child, but an heir, would have been immense. Could she really have risked revealing infertility or complications? Or would the temptation to create a flawless illusion have been too strong? After all, perception was Meghan's greatest weapon. And the public, let's be honest, ate it up. The glowing duchess. The fairy tale pregnancy. The idea of a modern, mixed-race royal baby. The narrative was perfect for headlines, perfect for television, perfect for the monarchy's image. Until, of course, the contradictions began stacking up. And once contradictions appear, they demand answers. But answers were never forthcoming. Instead, there were evasions, strange press releases, and shifting timelines. Meghan's pregnancy became less about joy and more about confusion. And confusion breeds suspicion. Because here's the truth. Meghan's first pregnancy announcement wasn't just a happy milestone. It was the start of one of the most controversial chapters in royal history. A chapter that, even today, leaves more questions than answers. And as we peel back the layers, one thing becomes clear. This was never a straightforward story of a duchess expecting her first child. Because the photographs didn't just capture a glowing mother-to-be. They captured something else. Something off. Something that would ignite the fire of suspicion forever. Was it real or carefully staged? That's the question that began to take hold once the first glow of excitement faded. The more people looked, the stranger it seemed. Meghan's pregnancy didn't unfold like others we'd seen before. It didn't even unfold like nature itself intended. Instead, it looked like a production, curated, manipulated, and, at times, oddly theatrical. Let's talk about the moon bump theory. For those who don't know, A moon bump is a prosthetic pregnancy belly, often used in movies or by women who, for personal reasons, wish to appear pregnant when they are not. These bumps come in different stages, 4 months, 6 months, 8 months, and they're designed to look authentic under clothing. Now, here's the shocking part. Eagle-eyed observers started pointing out moments where Meghan's bump didn't behave like a natural baby belly at all. Have you seen the clips? When she bent down, the belly seemed to fold in half like a pillow. When she crossed her legs, it shifted unnaturally. Some outfits made it look as though it had grown overnight, while in other appearances, it shrank back down. Pregnancies don't work like that. Pregnant bellies don't collapse. They don't deflate from one day to the next. And yet, Meghan seemed to. Doesn't that strike you as odd? Consider the difference with Kate Middleton. Kate's pregnancies were difficult. She suffered from hyperemesis gravidarum, but what was visible to the world was consistent. A gradual, believable growth. Each public appearance aligned with medical timelines. Nothing looked theatrical, nothing seemed staged. But with Meghan, the inconsistencies piled up. Some fashion experts even remarked that her choice of dresses seemed designed to exaggerate the bump, as if it were more important to show the image of pregnancy than to actually live through it. Now let's take this a step further. Think about how Meghan used body language during that time. She constantly, almost obsessively, cradled her belly. Both hands, in every photo, in every public outing. At first, the media praised her for being affectionate and protective. But after a while, the sheer repetitiveness felt performative. Have you ever wondered why? Was it pride? Or was it overcompensation? If you're trying to convince the world you're pregnant when you're not, wouldn't you do everything in your power to sell it? Cradling the bump becomes less of a maternal instinct and more of a prop gesture. And then came the comparisons. Diana, glowing outside St. Mary's with William and Harry. Kate, exhausted yet radiant, holding her newborns for the cameras. Every royal mother had followed the unwritten rule of transparency, showing the world both the bump and, eventually, the baby. Meghan? She broke that chain. No hospital steps. No public acknowledgement of a delivery. Just a mysterious series of statements, conflicting timelines, and staged photo ops. The palace itself added fuel to the fire. On the morning Archie was supposedly born, the palace announced Meghan was in labor. But just hours later, they declared that the baby had already arrived, hours before the announcement. How does that even make sense? How can you be in labor after the baby is already born? Unless, of course, you're not in labor at all. Unless the whole charade was being managed like a press release, not a real medical event. And here's where the contradictions become undeniable. If Meghan truly gave birth, where are the records? Where is the hospital staff who always come forward to describe such a historic event? With Diana and Kate, the doctors and midwives were celebrated, often knighted or honored for their service. With Meghan, silence. Nothing. The Portland hospital was mentioned, but no one ever confirmed witnessing her arrival or departure. No photos of Harry driving her there. No crowds outside, as would be expected. Just secrecy. Doesn't that reek of a cover-up? Let's not forget the strange absence of baby pictures immediately after birth. The first public glimpse of Archie didn't come outside a hospital, but in a staged photo call at Windsor Castle, 2 days later. Meghan stood there in a crisp white dress, Harry by her side, smiling for the cameras. But even then, the details were odd. The baby was swaddled so tightly you could barely see him. No proud mother glow, no exhaustion in Meghan's face, no raw emotion that often accompanies childbirth. Instead, it looked rehearsed, controlled, almost sterile. And then came the detail that still haunts observers to this day, Archie's birth certificate. Or rather, the peculiar editing of it. Initially, Meghan's name appeared as Rachel Meghan. Later, it was quietly changed to simply Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. No explanation, no transparency. Why edit a legal document unless there's something to hide? Could it be that the certificate didn't match the narrative, and changes had to be made to cover the tracks? Think about this carefully. If Meghan truly had given birth, the simplest way to silence critics would have been to do what every royal mother before her did: step outside with her newborn. Instead, she avoided it entirely. Why? Because once you invite cameras that close, the illusion becomes harder to maintain. A moon bump can't pass the scrutiny of hospital steps. A surrogate birth, if revealed, would destroy the narrative. So the solution was simple. Cut the public out, control the story, and rely on glossy photographs instead of lived reality. But the world was watching more closely than Meghan anticipated. Social media exploded with theories, with slowed-down videos, with freeze-frame evidence. The mainstream press tried to dismiss it as wild conspiracy, but the images spoke louder than words. Meghan's bump folding, her oddly fluctuating size, the secrecy around the delivery. One by one, the red flags stacked into something impossible to ignore. And the ultimate irony? The more Meghan tried to convince the world of her pregnancy, the less convincing it became. Her constant cradling, her dramatic bump showcasing outfits, her carefully timed announcements, they only amplified the suspicion. It's like an actor who oversells a role. Eventually, the performance becomes too polished, too deliberate, and the audience begins to doubt. The cracks in the illusion were showing. The whispers were growing louder. And then came one moment that would pour gasoline on the fire, a moment caught on camera that no amount of spin could erase. Because during one public event, Meghan's bump did something no real pregnancy belly ever should, and the footage went viral. That moment was the infamous Australian tour. The trip that was supposed to showcase Harry and Meghan as the monarchy's modern, glamorous ambassadors turned into the first real flashpoint of suspicion. The world was watching their every move, every handshake, every speech, every outfit. And Meghan, as though determined to make her pregnancy the center of attention, leaned into the narrative with gusto. From the second they landed in Sydney, the bump became a star in its own right. Meghan wore fitted dresses that highlighted her stomach, cradled it at every opportunity, and made sure photographers got their money's worth. The timing of the pregnancy announcement couldn't have been more convenient. The tour gave her a global stage to sell the story. But here's the twist. This visibility backfired. Because when millions of eyes are analyzing you in real time, mistakes are bound to show. One clip in particular still circulates on social media to this day. Meghan, crouching down in a fitted dress, her bump visibly shifting, even folding as though it were made of fabric, not flesh. Have you seen it? The footage is shocking. A real pregnant belly doesn't behave that way. It doesn't collapse in on itself like a pillow. And yet, there it was, broadcast for the world to see. At first, the mainstream media brushed it off as a wardrobe malfunction, but ordinary viewers weren't so quick to dismiss it. Theories erupted. Was she wearing a prosthetic bump? If so, why? Was it about controlling the timeline? About hiding the use of a surrogate? Or was it, as some argued, a desperate attempt to protect her public image as a fertile duchess delivering an heir? These questions gained traction precisely because Meghan's behavior invited them. She wasn't passive or discreet. She was almost theatrical in her insistence on making the bump a focal point. Think about it. How many times did you see Meghan holding her stomach during that tour? Over and over again, both hands pressed firmly against the belly, as though to prove something. But if it were real, why the need for constant reinforcement? Isn't a natural pregnancy obvious enough on its own? Doesn't overemphasis feel contrived? And then there was the clothing. Meghan's outfits seemed deliberately chosen to exaggerate the bump's appearance. Flowing dresses one day that made her look 6 months along, slim-cut gowns the next that suggested only 3 months. The inconsistency was impossible to ignore. Even royal watchers who had no interest in conspiracy theories began scratching their heads. How could a bump grow and shrink so quickly? Let's not forget Harry's behavior during that tour either. He seemed overly protective, constantly hovering near Meghan, his hand often placed on her back, guiding her movements. At first, it looked like tenderness. But on closer reflection, was it also control? Was he making sure the illusion stayed intact? Because Harry isn't blind. If something odd was happening, he would have seen it firsthand. Which raises the question, was he complicit in the charade, or simply going along with it to protect his wife? The Australian tour also highlighted another contradiction. Meghan frequently gave speeches about honesty, about authenticity, about living one's truth. Yet her very image, the central story of her pregnancy, appeared riddled with deception. Isn't it ironic? To speak of transparency while carefully constructing an illusion? The disconnect between her words and the visual evidence created a tension that no amount of PR could smooth over. Now imagine being a member of the palace staff at the time. Behind closed doors, aides must have noticed. They must have seen the inconsistencies up close. Reports from insiders later suggested that staffers were uneasy, that they whispered among themselves about unusual elements of Meghan's pregnancy. But the palace is built on silence. Scandals are contained, questions are avoided, and appearances are everything. To expose Meghan's alleged deception would be to risk shattering the monarchy's image at a time when it desperately needed rejuvenation. And yet, even with all this effort, the cracks kept showing. The Australian tour footage was just the beginning. More clips would surface later. Meghan standing up and her belly appearing to shift unnaturally. Meghan bending down and the bump folding as though hollow. Each clip added fuel to the fire, each one eroding public confidence in the narrative. But perhaps the strangest part of all was Meghan's own insistence on drawing attention to herself. A woman truly pregnant, under the glare of the world's cameras, might seek moments of modesty or privacy. Meghan, instead, sought the opposite. She seemed almost addicted to highlighting her condition. She touched, cradled, posed, turning what should have been a natural process into a performance. And in performance, mistakes happen. So by the time the tour ended, the whispers had turned into murmurs, the murmurs into quiet speculation, and the speculation into something far more dangerous, suspicion. People began asking the question openly, is Meghan really pregnant? The phrase moon bump started appearing online. And while the mainstream press still dismissed it, the seed had been planted. Once planted, such seeds grow. And that growth would become unstoppable when Archie's birth itself turned into one of the most secretive and baffling royal events in modern history. Because what followed wasn't just unusual, it was unprecedented. The birth that never was. That's how many now describe Archie Harrison's mysterious arrival into the world. In a family where childbirth is not just a personal moment, but a national spectacle, Meghan and Harry's handling of Archie's birth remains one of the strangest, most secretive, and most controversial royal events in living memory. Let's start with tradition. For decades, the royal family has treated births not as private affairs, but as matters of state. When Diana gave birth to William and Harry, she emerged outside the Lindo wing at St. Mary's Hospital, smiling bravely for the cameras, baby in her arms, a tired but glowing mother presenting the next heir to the nation. Kate Middleton followed the exact same tradition, 3 times. Each time, she and William appeared on those famous steps with their newborns, solidifying transparency, tradition, and continuity. It was part of the deal. In exchange for public adoration and privilege, the public is given proof. But when it came to Meghan, none of this happened. There were no hospital steps, no proud reveal outside the maternity ward, no eager crowds waving flags outside. Instead, there was confusion, secrecy, and an almost suspicious level of control over the narrative. On the morning of May 6, 2019, the palace released a statement saying Meghan was in labor. News outlets around the world began covering the story. Finally, the big moment had arrived. But just hours later, another statement was released. The baby had already been born. Archie had apparently arrived at 5:26 a.m., long before the palace had even announced labor. How does that make sense? How can a duchess be in labor if the baby had already been born? Was this simply sloppy PR? Or was it something far more deliberate? An attempt to stage manage an event that hadn't unfolded naturally at all? Even more bizarre was the location. At first, rumors swirled that Meghan wanted a home birth at Frogmore Cottage. Then whispers emerged that she'd been rushed to the Portland Hospital in London. But here's the strange thing, no one ever saw her there. No photographs of Meghan arriving. No staff speaking publicly about her presence. With Kate and Diana, the doctors who delivered their children were later honored with knighthoods. With Meghan? Nothing. No names, no recognition, no transparency. Almost as if no doctors had delivered her at all. When Harry finally appeared to the press hours later, his demeanor struck many as odd. He seemed nervous, over-rehearsed, repeating lines about how amazing Meghan was. But there was no detail, no emotion, nothing specific about the delivery. Compare that with William, who joked with reporters, mentioned Kate's well-being, and seemed genuinely open about the experience. Harry's vague statements, combined with the palace's confusing timeline, only deepened suspicion. And then came the photographs. 2 days later, the world was introduced to Archie in the grand halls of Windsor Castle. Meghan appeared in a crisp white dress, hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless. She looked radiant, too radiant, many argued, for a woman who had supposedly just gone through childbirth. Most new mothers appear exhausted, emotional, physically transformed. Meghan looked untouched. Her body showed no signs of recovery, her face no fatigue. Was this really a woman who had just delivered a baby? Or was it a carefully staged performance? Archie himself was almost invisible, swaddled tightly in a blanket, his face barely peeking out. He looked less like a newborn and more like a prop. Meghan and Harry beamed, but the moment lacked the rawness that usually comes with presenting a new life. It was glossy, curated, sanitized. The kind of rollout you'd expect from Hollywood, not Buckingham Palace. And then there's the matter of the birth certificate. At first, Meghan's full name, Rachel Meghan, was included, but soon after, the certificate was altered to remove her name, leaving only Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. No explanation was given. Why edit a legal document unless there was something to hide? Was it a simple clerical error, or a deliberate attempt to obscure the truth about Archie's origins? Now let's talk about the absence of hospital staff or witnesses. In any royal birth, there are always people involved, doctors, nurses, midwives, who later confirm details or receive honors. With Meghan, nothing. Total silence. Doesn't that seem suspicious? If Archie was born at the Portland, why wasn't the hospital basking in the publicity of having delivered a royal baby? Why was there no mention of the staff involved? Unless, of course, there was nothing to mention. And then, perhaps the most damning point of all, the secrecy surrounding Meghan's movements that day. Royal watchers, journalists, even paparazzi had no photographs of her going to the hospital, no images of her leaving, no witnesses to her labor. In an age where cameras are everywhere, that absence is almost impossible to explain, unless there was no hospital visit to capture in the first place. The public was left with more questions than answers. And those questions were not small ones. If Meghan had not given birth, who had? If Archie was delivered via surrogate, why hide it? Was it fear of public backlash? Pressure from the palace to maintain an image of fertility and tradition? Or Meghan's own desire to craft a perfect narrative, free from any perceived imperfection? Let me ask you directly. Doesn't it seem strange that in one of the most documented families on Earth, we have almost no credible evidence of Archie's birth? No hospital photos, no honored doctors, no candid details. Just staged pictures and conflicting statements. That's not transparency, that's a cover-up. And the cover-up didn't end there. Meghan and Harry's refusal to share basic details, their obsessive secrecy, and their carefully controlled media appearances all pointed to one thing: a desperate attempt to protect a narrative that was already beginning to crack. Because if Meghan didn't give birth to Archie, the logical next question is chilling. Who did? And the whispers of surrogacy began to spread like wildfire. The surrogate whispers began. And once they did, they never stopped. After Archie's mysterious birth and the smoke and mirrors rollout of information, the narrative shifted. People weren't just questioning inconsistencies anymore. They were suggesting something far more explosive: that Meghan Markle had never carried her children at all, and that surrogates had been used from the very beginning. Now, surrogacy itself is nothing scandalous. Millions of families around the world choose this path for reasons ranging from infertility to health risks to personal preference. But in the case of the royals, surrogacy carries implications that are uniquely explosive. Why? Because succession, legitimacy, and royal tradition are built on bloodlines and transparency. The royal family has always been expected to present heirs in a very specific way. Born of the mother, presented publicly, and validated through both tradition and official witnesses. To hide surrogacy is not simply a personal decision. It's seen as a betrayal of centuries of ritual. The whispers started small, buried in the corners of online forums. People replayed footage of Meghan's shifting bump, shared still frames of the infamous folding belly clip, and speculated that a prosthetic was being used to cover the truth. These whispers spread like wildfire, and soon, even mainstream commentators couldn't ignore them. Tom Bower, Lady C, and other royal biographers began hinting at unanswered questions about Meghan's pregnancies. Even if they didn't outright say the word surrogate, the implication was clear: something didn't add up. But here's the detail that made the whispers harder to dismiss. Meghan and Harry's obsession with secrecy wasn't just about Archie's birth. It extended to every detail surrounding his arrival. The doctors? Hidden. The location? Confused. The certificate? Altered. The public reveal? Delayed and sanitized. Each choice, on its own, might be explained. But together, they paint the picture of a couple desperate to conceal something fundamental. And surrogacy fits that puzzle too neatly to ignore. Let's pause and ask ourselves, why would Meghan feel the need to fake a pregnancy if a surrogate was involved? The answer lies in image. Meghan had branded herself as the fairy tale duchess, the outsider who brought new life, literally and symbolically, to the monarchy. To admit she hadn't carried her children herself would have undermined the perfection of that narrative. She would have looked vulnerable. She would have looked less powerful. And in Meghan's world, image is everything. But surrogacy in the royal context raises practical questions too. If Archie was born via surrogate, who was she? Was it someone close to Meghan? Someone vetted and bound by ironclad secrecy agreements? Could it even have been someone within Meghan's Hollywood circle, arranged privately and carefully concealed from the press? The fact that no one has ever come forward, not even anonymously, suggests one thing. Whoever was involved has been silenced, and silenced thoroughly. Consider this. Meghan had wealthy, powerful friends like Jessica Mulroney and Serena Williams, people with connections to high-level doctors, private clinics, and discreet arrangements. Could Meghan have orchestrated a surrogacy deal using those networks? Doesn't it make sense that someone so image-conscious would use her Hollywood connections to control every step of the process? And it didn't stop with Archie. By the time Meghan announced her second pregnancy, the one that supposedly led to Lilibet Diana, the surrogacy whispers had already become louder. The announcement photo itself, a glossy staged picture of Meghan lying in Harry's lap under a tree, felt more like a Hollywood publicity still than a candid moment. Again, the bump looked suspiciously staged, perfectly rounded, almost too polished. And when Lilibet was born, the secrecy was even more intense than with Archie. No hospital details, no public presentation, no photographs until carefully staged images months later. If the first birth raised suspicion, the second practically screamed cover-up. But let's talk about emotion for a moment. Imagine the pressure Meghan must have felt. She was already under attack from the press, already cast as the difficult duchess, already isolated within the palace. A surrogate arrangement, if exposed, could have been weaponized against her by the tabloids, painted as a betrayal of royal tradition, or used to question her legitimacy as a mother. Is it any wonder she may have chosen deception over transparency? It doesn't excuse it, but it explains it. Here's the chilling irony. Surrogacy, if admitted openly, would likely have garnered sympathy from many. People would have understood. But by allegedly staging pregnancies and hiding the truth, Meghan turned what could have been a relatable story into a scandal. Instead of compassion, she invited suspicion. Instead of honesty, she offered illusion. And illusion always invites doubt. The whispers also triggered deeper questions about the monarchy itself. If Archie and Lilibet were born via surrogates, what does that mean for their place in the line of succession? Royal rules are rooted in tradition, and while surrogacy is legal, it complicates centuries of precedent. Could this be the real reason for Meghan and Harry's obsessive secrecy? Were they terrified that revealing surrogacy would spark constitutional debates about their children's legitimacy? And then came the final twist in this chapter, Meghan herself. While lying on her sickbed, weakened and vulnerable, she reportedly whispered the truth, that Archie and Lilibet were indeed born via surrogates, and that the bumps had been nothing more than prosthetics. The confession, though quiet, was seismic, because in that moment, the whispers transformed into confirmation. But admitting it privately is one thing. What happens when the truth threatens to spill into the public arena? What happens when the illusion can no longer be maintained? Because Meghan's deception didn't end with Archie, the story was about to repeat itself, with even higher stakes. 2 years later, another pregnancy, another storm. By early 2021, Meghan Markle was once again at the center of global headlines. This time, it wasn't just the announcement of a new royal baby. It was the beginning of a saga that would intensify every whisper, every suspicion, and every accusation that had haunted her first supposed pregnancy. And just like before, the story didn't unfold naturally. It felt orchestrated, curated, almost scripted. The announcement itself was a spectacle. A black-and-white photo, shot by Miss Harriman, Meghan's close friend and photographer, showed Meghan lying in Harry's lap beneath a tree. She wore a flowing dress, her hands resting tenderly on her bump, her face glowing with serenity. Harry smiled above her, barefoot, looking down at his wife. The image was shared worldwide, praised by mainstream media as beautiful and symbolic. But did you notice how perfect it looked? Too perfect. The bump in that photograph was rounded, symmetrical, almost sculpted. It didn't look like the irregular, shifting belly of a real pregnancy. It looked like a Hollywood prop. Once again, Meghan had bypassed tradition. Instead of appearing in public to show her pregnancy as it progressed, she dropped a carefully staged image designed to eliminate scrutiny. Why? If she were truly pregnant, wouldn't she have embraced the chance to prove doubters wrong? Instead, she opted for control. A single photo, a single narrative, no room for questions. Doesn't that in itself suggest there was something to hide? And then there was the timing. The announcement came on Valentine's Day, an obvious attempt to add a romantic, symbolic layer to the story. But the date also echoed a moment from history. Princess Diana had announced her pregnancy with Harry on Valentine's Day in 1984. Was Meghan deliberately mirroring Diana to tie herself into that legacy? Was this another example of her obsession with controlling the narrative by aligning herself with the late princess? When Lilibet Diana was eventually born, on June 4, 2021, the secrecy went into overdrive. There were no official hospital photographs, no candid shots of Meghan entering or leaving, no named doctors, just a press release stating the baby had been delivered at Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital in California. But here's the strange thing, no witnesses, no grainy paparazzi photos, no staff interviews. For a royal birth, even in the US, that level of invisibility is almost impossible. Unless, of course, there was nothing to see. Think about it. Archie's birth had been shrouded in mystery, but at least there had been some semblance of public acknowledgement, however stage-managed. With Lilibet, there was virtually nothing. Just words on a page, a few glossy photographs released weeks later, and Harry and Meghan's insistence that everything had been normal. Doesn't that strike you as odd? Doesn't it feel like they were trying to avoid scrutiny altogether? And then there was the name. Lilibet Diana, a name directly invoking both Queen Elizabeth and Princess Diana. A bold, almost audacious choice. It tied the child symbolically to the monarchy Meghan and Harry had supposedly rejected. But it also felt like a distraction, a way to ensure that discussions of the baby were framed around emotion and sentimentality, rather than scrutiny of the circumstances of her birth. Clever, isn't it? But once again, the bump photos told their own story. Meghan was rarely seen in public during her supposed second pregnancy, but on the few occasions she appeared, inconsistencies were glaring. At one virtual event, her bump looked small, barely noticeable. Weeks later, in a different photo, it appeared massive and round, as if months had passed overnight. Just like with Archie, the size fluctuated unnaturally, fueling speculation that she was once again relying on prosthetics rather than carrying a child herself. And here's where things get even more curious. For months after Lilibet's birth, the public saw no photographs of her at all. Not a single candid shot. Not a hospital reveal. Not even a family photo with her clearly visible. Instead, the first real glimpse came with Harry and Meghan's Christmas card later that year, showing a carefully staged, laughing family moment. Once again, Meghan chose image over authenticity. But doesn't that itself betray the truth? If Lilibet had been born naturally, why not proudly share that joy immediately, as most parents do? Why wait months, only to reveal a picture so curated it felt like an advertisement? The secrecy didn't just fuel suspicion, it amplified it. And by this time, the whispers of surrogacy had become mainstream. Commentators openly asked why Meghan refused to follow royal traditions, why she controlled access to her children so obsessively, and why every detail of their births seemed clouded in contradiction. The palace, true to form, remained silent, neither confirming nor denying. But silence is its own form of confirmation, isn't it? Here's the real question. If Meghan didn't give birth to Lilibet, then who did? Was it the same surrogate who delivered Archie? Was it another carefully vetted, contract-bound woman whose identity has been erased from the narrative? Or was it a private clinic arrangement, hidden behind legal walls of confidentiality? The truth remains buried. But Meghan's sickbed confession, her whispered admission that both Archie and Lilibet were born via surrogates, suggests that the answers are far more explosive than anyone imagined. Because the second time around, Meghan didn't just repeat the pattern, she doubled down. She pushed the secrecy further, leaned harder on curated images, and dared the public to question her. But the irony is that the more she tried to control the story, the less believable it became. And then came the Oprah interview, a moment that was supposed to clear Meghan's name, redefine her legacy, and silence critics once and for all. Instead, it opened the door to even greater suspicion. Because if Meghan could twist the bridesmaid dress row, could she have twisted the truth about her pregnancies too? The Oprah interview changed everything. For Meghan Markle, it was supposed to be the grand stage where she reclaimed her narrative, silenced critics, and positioned herself as the ultimate victim of a cruel, outdated monarchy. But instead, it exposed something far deeper: her ability to flip stories, reframe events, and reshape reality to suit her agenda. And once viewers saw that, they began asking an even darker question. If she could twist something as small as a bridesmaid dress row, what else had she twisted? Could she have twisted the truth about her pregnancies too? Picture the scene, March 2021. Meghan and Harry, seated in a lush California garden across from Oprah Winfrey, one of the most powerful interviewers in the world. Meghan wore a black dress adorned with white lotus flowers, her hair styled to perfection, her demeanor carefully poised. This wasn't just an interview, it was a performance. Millions of viewers tuned in, expecting revelations. And Meghan delivered. She spoke about mental health struggles, about racism, about feeling abandoned by the palace. But the most striking moment, the one that reverberated across the globe, was her retelling of the infamous bridesmaid dress incident. Do you remember how the press originally reported it? Back in 2018, multiple outlets claimed Meghan had made Kate cry in the lead-up to her wedding, supposedly over Princess Charlotte's ill-fitting bridesmaid dress. At the time, the story painted Meghan as demanding, difficult, even cruel. But in her interview with Oprah, Meghan flipped the script entirely. With a straight face, she claimed it was actually Kate who made her cry. Just like that, Meghan inverted the narrative. What had once been an example of her cruelty became evidence of her victimhood. And here's the kicker. She admitted Kate had later apologized and brought her flowers. Yet she framed herself as the wronged party, the woman unfairly maligned by the press. Powerful, isn't it? One story, two versions. And the second version came years later, when Meghan needed it most. But ask yourself this. If Meghan could rewrite that story, if she could so confidently reframe the narrative, why wouldn't she do the same with her pregnancies? After all, what's bigger, more image-defining, than the birth of a royal child? The Oprah interview revealed Meghan's greatest weapon, her ability to play with perception. And that weapon wasn't limited to minor incidents. It extended to the most intimate, the most consequential chapters of her life. If she could convince millions that the bridesmaid incident had been distorted, couldn't she also convince them that her pregnancies were real, even if they weren't? And here's the deeper contradiction. Meghan claimed she wanted privacy, that the palace had denied her protection, that she craved space for her family. Yet, there she was, sitting in Oprah's garden, spilling secrets to the world in prime time. Privacy, it seemed, meant control. Meghan didn't want less publicity. She wanted the right kind of publicity. The same dynamic could easily apply to her pregnancies. She didn't want transparency. She wanted her version of the truth. Then came the emotional spikes. Meghan tearfully described her suicidal thoughts during pregnancy, claiming she reached out for help but was ignored. Powerful, heartbreaking words. But here's the chilling question. If she was never pregnant, what exactly was she describing? Was it metaphor, exaggeration, or another crafted illusion? Isn't it possible that the raw emotion was real, but the context manipulated? After all, the Oprah interview showed us just how skilled Meghan was at weaving truth and fabrication into one seamless story. And the contradictions kept stacking up. Meghan claimed she and Harry were married in a private ceremony days before the royal wedding, a statement later debunked by the Archbishop of Canterbury himself. If she could lie about something as verifiable as her wedding date, why not about something far harder to prove, like carrying a child? The public began to connect the dots. If Meghan's word couldn't be trusted about the small things, could it really be trusted about the monumental ones? And that's when the surrogacy whispers grew louder than ever. People began replaying the footage of her baby bumps, analyzing the Oprah interview in the context of deception. What if this, too, was another story Meghan had carefully rewritten? And let's not forget Oprah's role. The queen of confessional television never pressed Meghan on the inconsistencies. She didn't ask why Archie's birth was shrouded in secrecy. She didn't question the absence of hospital details. She didn't probe the rumors of a surrogate. Instead, she let Meghan's version of events stand unchallenged. But silence doesn't erase doubt, it amplifies it. And for millions watching, the questions only multiplied. What struck many viewers most was Meghan's calm composure throughout. She didn't appear as a woman burdened by guilt or consumed by trauma. She appeared as an actress delivering lines, perfectly rehearsed, perfectly timed, perfectly performed. And if she could perform victimhood so convincingly, why couldn't she have performed motherhood in the same way? In the days after the Oprah interview, Meghan was praised by some and condemned by others. But beneath the polarized reactions, one undeniable truth emerged. Meghan had proven her mastery of narrative manipulation. She could take any story, twist it, and present herself as the heroine. The bridesmaid dress row was the perfect example. And if she could rewrite that, then the possibility that she had rewritten the story of her pregnancies didn't just seem possible. It seemed likely. But then, something happened that ripped open the carefully woven illusion. A single image. A single piece of footage. Something Meghan couldn't control, couldn't edit, couldn't spin. Because one photo sent shockwaves across the internet. And it betrayed her in ways words never could. The photo that betrayed her. It wasn't staged, it wasn't glossy, and it certainly wasn't meant to be dissected frame by frame. But that's exactly what happened. And once the internet got hold of it, the illusion Meghan Markle had worked so hard to maintain began to crumble in real time. It was a seemingly ordinary moment. Meghan attending a public event, walking confidently in a fitted dress, Harry by her side. Cameras flashed, as they always did. But when Meghan crouched down to greet someone, the bump shifted. Not in the natural way a pregnant belly might shift with movement. No, this was something entirely different. The rounded stomach folded. It bent inwards, as if it were hollow. For a split second, the illusion collapsed, and the world caught a glimpse of what might really be hiding beneath the surface. That short clip spread like wildfire. On social media, users slowed it down, zoomed in, and replayed it endlessly. Look at the way it folds, people said. That's not a baby, that's padding. Others compared it to prosthetic moon bumps available online. The similarities were uncanny. The shape, the flexibility, the way it seemed to shift unnaturally, it all lined up too perfectly. Now, defenders of Meghan tried to dismiss it as a wardrobe malfunction. They said it was just fabric, just the dress playing tricks on the eye. But let's be honest. Have you ever seen a pregnant belly fold in half like a deflated balloon? Doesn't that defy basic biology? Pregnant stomachs don't collapse. They don't bounce or shift like foam. They are firm, heavy, and immovable. What the world saw in that clip was not biology, it was theater. And this wasn't the only incident. Other photos began surfacing, showing similar oddities. In some, the bump appeared enormous, jutting out like she was due any day. In others, taken just days apart, it seemed smaller, flatter, inconsistent with the steady growth of a real pregnancy. In one video, Meghan's bump appeared to swing slightly as she walked, almost like a weighted prop beneath her dress. The internet noticed, and once people saw it, they couldn't unsee it. Let's take this further. Those who dug deeper began comparing Meghan's movements to women in late pregnancy. Have you ever noticed how women move differently in their third trimester? The waddle, the slowed pace, the difficulty bending down. Meghan displayed none of that. She crouched with ease, crossed her legs effortlessly, and bounced back up from low positions as if nothing were weighing her down. It was the performance of pregnancy without the reality of it. Doesn't that strike you as strange? Doesn't it look less like motherhood and more like method acting? The damning comparisons grew. Clips of Kate Middleton heavily pregnant were placed side by side with Meghan's footage. Kate's movements were slow, deliberate, encumbered by the weight of her baby. Meghan, by contrast, moved with agility, her bump shifting like a detachable accessory. Viewers were left asking, who looks more like a woman carrying life? And then came the analogies. People likened Meghan's belly to movie props used on set. In Hollywood, where Meghan had spent years as an actress, fake bumps are standard practice. They come in different stages, adjustable for the camera, designed to trick the eye. Could it be that Meghan, an actress by trade, had imported Hollywood techniques into royal life? Could it be that what we saw wasn't motherhood, but stagecraft? Of course, the palace never addressed these images directly, but their silence only made the speculation louder. Because silence, in the royal world, is rarely neutral, it's protective. If Meghan's bump had been genuine, wouldn't the palace have brushed off the rumors with medical confirmation? Wouldn't they have released candid photos to shut down the conspiracy theories once and for all? Instead, they said nothing. Which raises the question, what exactly were they hiding? But here's where the betrayal stings most. Meghan built her public image on authenticity, on telling her truth. She positioned herself as the victim of lies, the woman wronged by the media, the Duchess misunderstood. And yet, in that single collapsing bump, she was exposed as the one weaving a deception. Isn't that the ultimate irony? And let's not forget the emotional manipulation layered on top. Meghan often spoke about how deeply she loved being a mother, how important motherhood was to her identity. But if she never carried those children, then every bump cradle, every glowing smile, every speech about maternal suffering was built on artifice. Doesn't that feel like betrayal, not just of the monarchy, but of the public who believed in her? The photo didn't just betray Meghan's secret. It shattered her credibility. Because if she could fake a pregnancy so convincingly, what else could she fake? If she could sell the world on prosthetic bumps, could she also sell them on half-truths about racism, about her treatment, about her own victimhood? The implications were enormous. And that's when the whispers turned into something louder. Theories became certainties in the minds of many. Meghan hadn't just staged one pregnancy, she had staged two. And the final confirmation wouldn't come from photos or videos. It would come from Meghan herself. Because on her sickbed, when all illusions fell away, Meghan whispered the truth that no one was supposed to hear. She never gave birth to Archie or Lilibet. Both children were born through surrogates. But that admission, whispered in weakness, carried consequences so explosive that even the monarchy itself trembled at the thought of it going public. On her sickbed, Meghan whispered the truth. It wasn't in front of cameras. It wasn't during a glossy interview or a staged photo shoot. No, this moment was raw, stripped of performance, stripped of the control she had clung to for years. Weakened, vulnerable, and staring down the fragility of her own health, Meghan finally broke the silence she had carried for so long. And the words she uttered sent chills through the room. They were both born through surrogates, she confessed. Simple, direct, devastating. Archie Harrison, Lilibet Diana, the two children who had been at the center of Meghan's public image, the anchors of her royal narrative, the proof of her fairy tale motherhood. In that moment, Meghan admitted what the world had whispered for years, that she never gave birth to either of them, that the pregnancies, the baby bumps, the constant stomach cradling had been nothing more than a performance. But let's not underestimate the weight of this confession. This wasn't just about her own children. This was about the monarchy itself. Because once Meghan admitted the truth, everything else began to unravel. Why would she hide it? That's the first question, isn't it? If surrogacy is legal, if it's accepted in modern society, why not be honest? Why not own it, and even turn it into a story of empowerment? The answer is simple: image. Meghan had crafted her identity as the glowing royal mother, the woman bringing diversity and modernity to the monarchy. To admit she hadn't carried her children would have shattered that image. It would have turned sympathy into suspicion. And in a family obsessed with appearances, Meghan knew she couldn't risk being seen as less than perfect. But here's the irony. By hiding the truth, by staging the pregnancies, she didn't protect her image, she destroyed it. Because when the secret finally slipped, it exposed not just the lie about her motherhood, but the lie about her authenticity. Meghan had always claimed to tell her truth. But what is her truth worth if it conceals the truth? Picture the scene on that sickbed. Meghan, once the actress in control of the stage, now reduced to whispers, admitting what she had fought so hard to keep hidden. Was it guilt that pushed her to speak? Was it the weight of years of deception finally crushing her spirit? Or was it something else, a desperate attempt to unburden herself before the truth came out another way? Because secrets this big don't stay buried forever.